You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Today, we're talking about a proposed billionaire tax, not a millionaire tax. Because here in the state of Washington, we got billionaires to contend with. Proposed billionaire tax comes to Olympia, our capital, as Washington Democrats seek to revamp the tax system. We're essentially only going after a handful of people here because this can pull our budget out of the place that it is right now, which is massive, hemorrhaging, because businesses haven't been going, and that's what happens when you shut down the economy. Budgets, they don't work out. God, we don't have that tax revenue. Oh, what are we going to do? Let's tax the billionaires. That's what we're talking about today. Before we jump on into this Seattle Times article, my name's Sean Reynolds. I own Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds and Kline Appraisal, and I talk about news content that you want to hear. All right, here we go. A new idea to flip Washington's regressive tax system goes straight to the top. It seeks to tax the state's billionaires. Do you remember when it used to be just enough to be a multi-millionaire? Well, now it's not. You got to be a billionaire to be a player, right? Washington's got a bunch of them. It's kind of weird that state of Washington, kind of upper northwest nowhere, has got all these billionaire players, but it's the tech impact. It's Bill Gates. It's Amazon. I mean, just crazy amount of wealth here that's in just the hands of a few people. So we're going to tax him, right? Sponsored by Rep. Noel Frame, Democrat from Seattle, House Bill 1406. It would apply a 1% tax on a state resident's taxable intangible wealth above $1 billion. All right, we're going to give you $1 billion. You get a hall pass with that. Everything else above that, we're going to tax you. And 1% might not sound like a lot, but when you've got billions and billions of net worth, it's a lot. It's millions of dollars, right? We'll get to exactly how much it is. If passed, we're going to get to it very shortly here, like this paragraph. If passed, the tax, which would impact fewer than 100 people, but would raise a torrent of money. A fiscal analysis of the bill estimates it would bring in $4.95 billion with a B in the 2023-2025 budget cycle. So 23, 24, 25, that budget cycle, it would bring in almost $5 billion with the B, big ones. Okay, I can see why they're looking at that. Is this a way to raise money? Yes, it is. This is how we can get out of our big holes because we didn't have the economy open. And that's what we're doing. That's equal to nearly 10% of the existing two-year state operating budget when it was signed into law at $52.4 billion. Yeah, huge numbers by just taxing just a handful of people. Will this happen? I don't know. If it does, you're going to see some billionaires moving. They're going to go out of the state. They're going to go, you know what? My residence it's no longer here. It's like, who was that? Larry Ellison of Oracle, who owns Lanai, 95% of Lanai, one of the Hawaiian Islands. He basically said, yep, and this was in an email to everybody, yep, I'm out of here. Mahalo, gone to Hawaii. And he just kind of took off. Can't blame him because California, where he was, not so good as far as the state income tax goes. And that's what I keep hearing repeatedly, especially from you guys in California. We have incredible taxation. You guys get taxed out. You guys get whacked with tax, state income tax. And then you don't really get any bang for your buck for those taxes. In fact, it's kind of going the opposite way. You're paying more in taxes and you are getting less in the way of services, things that you can quantify, like taking garbage off the streets. That's no longer a concern, right? I mean, you're paying all this money. What are you paying it for? To kind of keep the existing political structure in place, it kind of seems like. HB 1406, we're back to the bill, which got a legislative committee hearing Tuesday, is the latest twist in a years-long effort by Democrats to raise taxes on the wealthiest in an effort to make the system more progressive. Every time I see more progressive, I just think train wreck. Honestly, I do. Anytime you have something progressive, it's like, okay, yeah, that's probably not going to work out. And here's why. And this whole thing, Same drill. As one of a handful of states that has no income tax, Washington coffers depend heavily on a state sales tax. And when your economies aren't open and you aren't selling stuff and businesses aren't able to sell stuff, what happens to that state sales tax? Oh, it's not there. You don't have it. So you got to come up with creative ways to fill those budget shortfalls, and taxing the billionaires, that's a solid one. I mean, that's a solid one. Will it happen? I don't know. If it does, I mean, that's going to be entertaining. I personally am not a billionaire, so I am not concerned on this one. However, and I'm joking here, of course. However, the people that are billionaires that are running these big companies, you might not like them, but this is such a concerted effort that it's like, what are we doing here? Yeah, we're just taxing the billionaires because they've got it. You know, they don't need it. They don't need that much money. They haven't worked that hard. They got rich off the coronavirus recession. They got rich. We got a K-shaped recovery. All right. But yeah, taxing billionaires? All right. It just makes Washington seem weird, right? It really does. I mean, Washington's already weird, but this is what we're doing. So Washington coffers depend heavily on a state sales tax as well as taxes on property and businesses. So just tax everybody. Just give everybody a big old whack tax, right? Frame's proposal comes as state lawmakers and Governor Jay Inslee work to draft a new 2-year state operating budget that funds schools, prisons, parks, and social services. We need money. Our budget, it got broke by the Rona. Although parts of Washington's economy and tax collections have rebounded amid the coronavirus pandemic, Democrats have said they believe new taxes will be needed to adequately fund programs. I bet they will. New taxes. And we've been hearing since the beginning of the coronavirus, state income tax coming to Washington. Keep hearing that. With so much money to spread around, Frame's proposed new tax would fund public health, education, housing, childcare, and public safety, according to the bill. It would also pay for Washington's long-stalled tax rebate program for low-income working people, Frame said, and it could help Washington recover from the coronavirus pandemic and ensuing economic downturn. Ensuing? Really? I didn't realize that we're out of the economic downturn or the one that hasn't occurred. It's already here. It's been ongoing. That's what happens when you shut down an economy, especially the state the size of the big as Washington. I mean, you're going to have an economic downturn. That's where we got. So it's not ensuing. It's here. It's happening now. And that's why you've got such a budget shortfall, right? At the same time, low and middle income people pay a greater share of their income in taxes compared with the more wealthy Washingtonians. Do they? Because we're just kind of making a statement here, not really backing it up with anything. It's kind of like based on the data and the science. If you just say something, maybe people will believe it. Just tell them it's based on the data and the science. Oh, okay. Well, it's based on the data and the science. I don't know. Do you believe that? I tend to look at the data and the science and go, oh, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And I just think that it's not acceptable and completely out of line with our values, said Frame, who has co-chaired a work group tasked with spurring conversation about Washington's tax systems. So we're spurring conversation. We are rethinking. We are reimagining. That's what we're doing here in Washington. Let's keep going here. Republicans like Rep. Drew Stokesbury, Republican from Auburn, Washington, quickly raised questions about whether the tax is constitutional and what would happen if Billionaire simply decided to move out of the state to avoid it. Even the bill's own fiscal analysis raised those questions. So it's like, this is the road we're going to go down, and we know that it's not a foolproof plan, because if the people that we're proposing taxation on, if they just move out of the state, then this plan doesn't really work. It's kaput. We're going to throw that out there initially because we believe it might be a real issue if the billionaires move out of town and we don't have anybody to tax here. Kind of puts a hole in our little program there. But we'll deal with that when we get there because our budget is really short. We got to come up with something. We got to do something. It's kind of like when they did the Amazon tax to Amazon. What did Amazon do in that case? I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah, they just started moving employees out of Seattle into Bellevue. That's what they did, right? They're going to move them anywhere they can to avoid that tax because that's not a tax they need to pay. And guess what? This tax here that's being proposed, that's not a tax that billionaires need to pay. They're not going to keep their residents in the state of Washington and be exposed to taxes like $1 billion a year individually. They're just not going to do that. No billionaire is going to go, oh, yeah, for the greater good of mankind, I'm going to give $1 billion of my dollars to the state of Washington, who have proven so well that they can manage our money for us. I mean, time and time again, state of Washington, oops. Got the whole thing with the Employment Security Department. Did you see that? Nigerian hackers took them for $600 million. Lawsuit on that one against whatever security company that was. That just happened. I'll be doing a podcast on that. Not good. State of Washington. Got stuff going, not necessarily the direction you want to see it go in. But get back to the article here. But I can't say it's terribly surprising. This is something folks on the left have been talking about for a while, said Stokesbury, who works on budget issues for House Republicans. Under Frame's proposal, the first $1 billion of intangible assets are exempt from the tax. You get a free hall pass on your first $1 billion. It's okay. It's not all of your net worth. Now, the fact that you have a net worth of $89 billion and we're giving you the first $1 billion tax-free, that should say it all. We really appreciate you being a billionaire. But, on the other $88 billion, yeah, we're going to tax you 1%. And we think this is probably the way we're going to solve our issues here. According to a legislative analysis of the proposal, worldwide intangible assets above that threshold would be taxed at 1% and would include cash, financial instruments like stocks, bonds, contracts, commodities, and pension funds, units of ownership in what's known as Subchapter K entity. That includes some types of partnerships, joint ventures, and limited liability companies. So these are a lot of this stuff is private. You own a bunch of stock, you own a bunch of bonds, you have contracts. Are people on the honor system here? What do we got going on? How are they going to measure this stuff? They're going to do an audit on the billionaires every year. Hey, you didn't claim the number of commodities. That doesn't match up with what we've got on record for you. And your pension funds, little bit light there. We need you to come with more taxes. You need to pay more taxes. And then types of partnership, joint ventures, and limited liability, LLC. Any billionaire, he's got all his money tied up in corporations that are convoluted at best, typically, to understand. Because that's what you do. It's a form of ownership, and it protects you and gives you the best tax advantage. It sounds like rich people talk for avoiding taxes. But what you do is you just figure out a tax strategy with your accountant and go, all right, this is the money you make. If you want to pay more in taxes, here's what you do. If you want to pay less in taxes, let's do this strategy. It's all above board, and it is based on the law. But any good CPA, tax strategist, they'll kind of show you the same ropes. All right, here's where your income is. Here's where your deficiencies are. Here's where you can get attacked. Somebody sues you. Okay, you need to have this kind of corporation set up. All that good stuff, right? Rich people stuff, Property that residents pay real estate taxes on are exempt. Okay. And HB 1406 also exempts other types of intangible assets from being taxed, like companies' worldwide wealth and debts allowed to the local, state, and federal governments. So, debts owed to the local, state, and federal government. Some weird stuff going on here, right? Non-financial assets such as customer lists, trademarks, brand names, patents, copyrights, and licenses would also not be subject to the tax. Because it's really hard to put an assigned value to those assets. And this is crazy. This is literally crazy stuff. Crazy stuff we're doing here. One concern raised by Stokesbury is that the proposal might run afoul of a provision in the state constitution under a provision that calls for taxes to be uniformly applied. Another question. So you can't, And so these taxes, there's nothing uniform about them. It's like, okay, this applies to all of the billionaires out there, all 100 of them or whatever. And another analysis I read, it said, well, this really truly applies to about like 10, maybe 11 people in Washington. And then when it really gets down to it, it applies to basically 4 dudes, right? I mean, and we kind of know who they are. And then you're like, oh yeah, billionaire. Like, oh, they've got a lot of money. Let's let them pay for it. I'm not okay with that. I'm just not. It's like, this is ridiculous because when it happens to those guys, it's going to happen to the rest of us sooner or later. And I think that's what happens. Look for a state income tax in the state of Washington. Another question, would Washington's billionaires just pick up and leave? Yeah, I think they might, right? I mean, people are picking up and leaving anyway because of the ridiculousness going on in the state of Washington. But this just gives the heavy hitters one more incentive. They can live wherever they want. They've probably already got multiple residences in multiple states, right? That's just what they do. And so maybe they move to Texas. Maybe they move to South Beach in Miami, in Florida, where they have more freedom. Maybe they move to Austin. I don't know. Maybe they move to Idaho. So many people I keep hearing talking about, I want to move to Idaho. All right. Yeah. I mean, I get it. You go into a state where it's more in line with your values. And what if Texas secedes from the Union? That could be crazy, right? Texas is like, yeah, we don't like what the rest of you guys are doing. We are out of here. Trying to get out of there. How many other states follow? Probably a bunch. Wild times, right? But it's ridiculous stuff like this tax here that you're like, huh, okay. Yeah, I can see where they're going with that, but is that fair? Is that constitutional? And then what if those guys just move? Nobody in their right mind is going to pay $1 billion a year or more for the privilege of living in Washington state. This is said by Jim King. He's a lobbyist with the Independent Business Association. Let me read that again. Nobody in their right mind is going to pay $1 billion a year or more for the privilege of living in Washington state. Let's see. I live in Washington, but I'll still keep a residence there. I now no longer am a resident of Washington state. That's what they're going to do. They're going to keep their house. They're going to keep whatever it is, but they're going to basically go to another state where they've got a better deal because they are liquid and they can do that. This is not well thought through. This is a try for, and this is kind of how Washington handles stuff, right? All right, we're going to get rid of, all this stuff with the police, but even though crime is rising, we're going to have to rethink, we're going to have to reimagine how we're going to handle crime in the future that is accelerated when we have fewer police. How are we going to handle our state budget when we've got these massive shortfalls? All right. Let's tax the really ultra rich. We got a handful of them. You can just see them sitting around going, oh, I am so glad these tech company billionaires live in the state of Washington because we're going to take just a little bit of a bite out of them each year. And you know what? They'll probably just take it, just like Amazon took the Amazon tax. I mean, they didn't? Oh, they started moving people out? What? Things are not what they seem at all times, right? I mean, just kind of know that. So this guy, Jim King, who said that King was one of a handful of opponents among the 1,326 people who signed to register an opinion on the bill in Tuesday's public hearing in the House Finance Committee. This will be an interesting one to see how this goes. I could see it getting passed. People are like, yeah, it's the billionaires. Who cares? But man, this does not state we want your business here, does it? No, it states we're going to take advantage of you. If you are really successful, we're going to take advantage of you. We're going to have you pay the rest of our taxes, not based on a fair or equitable system, but because you can. So you are being rewarded for your years of hard work, getting this business going, creating billions of dollars in wealth. We're going to reward you by, yep, that's it, taxing you and giving it to whomever we think is more deserving. Because that's what your responsibility as a citizen in the state of Washington, that's what it comes down to. Sorry to tell you. It's not to enjoy all the benefits of living in a state with no income tax. It is to be taxed. Let's make that clear. We want to tax you, and we'll try and make it as painless as possible. So there's going to be some random stuff that we're not going to tax you on. But for the most part, yeah, we're going to drill you for some taxes because you've been successful. Other people are going to argue that, well, they can afford it. That is not the point. That's not my point. That's not how business should work. And yet, or taxation should work. And yet, it kind of seems like that's the path we're going down here in the state of Washington. All right, so that is it for me on this one. As this one follows, I'm kind of 50-50 on whether this will go through. Knowing that's the state of Washington, I'm kind of like, well, all bets are off. Anything could happen because we have seen some of the most ridiculous stuff happen here in the state of Washington. You're seeing stuff down in Portland, in Oregon as well. But here in Washington, I mean, we've just got a bunch of Looney Tunes running our government that it's not based on the data or the science. It's just kind of, yeah, let's give this a run. Let's see if this will stick. Probably will. It might not. But in the meantime, we are reimagining. We're rethinking all kinds of policy. Man, we could just get going here. We could just destroy a lot of businesses. That's where they're headed. That's where it's going. That's where I see it going. So whether or not they get this bill through, I don't know. But I'll keep covering it right here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of it. Much appreciated. I will catch up with you guys on the next one. Bye for now. Stay safe out there. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.